Welcome to the Ancestral Healing Summit, a free online event where you'll learn from top experts about connecting with your ancestors to heal your lineages and transform your life. Share this powerful program with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Lisa Bonis.
Welcome to this session of the Ancestral Healing Summit with my guest, Eileen Day McKusick. In this session, we'll explore energenetics, the tone of the song of our DNA. Eileen McKusick is a researcher, inventor, author, speaker, and educator who's been studying the effects of sound on the human body since 1996. She's the creator of the sound therapy method Biofield tuning, and she's the founder of the Biofield Tuning Institute. She's also the author of Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy, and the upcoming book, Raise Your Voltage, Using Sound to Improve Your Electric Health. Eileen, I am so excited to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is one of my favorite topics, so I'm glad to be here.
Me too. So this is going to be a great conversation. So let's start by exploring what is probably a new word for most of us, energenetics. What is energenetics?
So energenetics is a word that that I started using. I don't think I coined it. I think it kind of cropped up, in use with a few people at the same time, because I felt like I needed something to describe a phenomenon I was coming across in my research and in my practice using sound to help shift people's state, sound healing, sound therapy. And energenetics, basically what it is like you said in the intro, it's the tone of the song of our DNA. And it's a really different way of looking at genetics, which is a very chemical kind of thing. We think of DNA, we immediately think of matter and fixed matter, and like how, you get the genes that you inherit as if it's something that's very fixed. But I come to see it and the human body in general as this sort of fluid, dynamic, ever-changing musical expression that can be altered very quickly and very easily when you start to look at it in that way.
Okay. I love that DNA is more like flowing music than fixed chemistry. That's a fascinating statement. So how does sound actually shift our DNA?
Well, we are essentially instruments. We're compositions of frequencies. And just like any instrument or car, will get out of tune. People get out of tune. I'm actually learning to play the guitar right now. And my favorite part of learning to play the guitar is actually tuning it, which is kind of funny, because I've been tuning people for years. But, it's interesting to me how every day that I pick up the guitar, it's out of tune, and I have to spend time bringing it back into tune. And life has that effect on our own human bodies. Stress, ambient stress, just being in the environment that we're in, makes us out of tune. And when you continue to have repeated stress over and over, you go more and more out of tune. And that becomes your inner composition, full of sharps and flats and anxiety and this and that. That's your tonal vibrational emissions. It's your beingness, right? When you play your instrument, it's really out of tune. Well, then you get pregnant and you have kids, and they're in that vibrational soup. That emotional timbre of our inheritance is also present. We are actually tonally predisposed from birth, to some degree, due to the vibrational inheritances of growing up in our mom's womb, but also just being in the environment of our parents. And everything in the body is tones and rhythms and flows and patterns. And we look at everything with like words and chemistry. So we sort of miss this tonal part. But the tonal part is really the essence of who we are. It's our inner experience. You know, are you feeling depressed? You've got all these low, heavy tones expressing in your system. Like many people that I've treated who have depression tend to look at it at the level of like me and mine. It's my depression and, you know, I have to solve it. But what happens when I listen to the body, there's these features in, this sort of requires probably a big backstory, but what I call the Biofield anatomy, there are these features called the ancestral rivers that are flows within our electromagnetic field. Mm-hmm. And on the right side, we find our father, and on the left side, we find our mother. And this is the tonal genetic inheritance of these two streams of DNA that have united to create us. And so we are informed by the experiences of our ancestors and the tones that those experiences generated in them, which they then pass down to us. Now, there's tons of evidence out there at the moment, and I'm sure you're talking to a number of people who are talking about how, you know, science in all these different ways is showing us that we suffer from the experiences of our ancestors. You know, what they've realized with Holocaust, the children of Holocaust victims and that sort of thing. And even stuff with mice, you know, where they've like traumatized one generation and generations later, you know, that source of trauma still wigs out those mice. So, you know, as far as depression goes, that might be a tonal sequence, a part of your inner music that's been going on for generations. That's just such a deeply rooted pattern. And it's not even your fault. You know, you just pop into the time-space continuum in this DNA stream that happens to be expressing this particular music. But the beautiful thing is that when you start to look at it in those terms, it actually becomes a lot easier to change it up because it's fluid and it's dynamic, right? So if I've inherited this out of tune instrument, I can actually go out and figure out how to get it in tune. And then I get to enjoy the beauty of all the good stuff because I came from a line of survivors. We're here, right? So there's a strength in there regardless of the noise. Yeah.
Okay, this is really fascinating, and I totally grok what you're saying here. But what I'm wondering, you mentioned that we can tune it up, but it seems to me like this is so deeply embedded and ingrained, and it's so a part of who we are and who we were formed into being by, as you said, the generations of people feeling the same way. How can something so deeply a part of us be shifted into a happier, healthier state?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll be perfectly honest in telling you that, you know, it took me years and years and years. Like, you know, my kind of emotional tone that I carried was sadness. And I carried it from my own childhood, my own experience of being, you know, always being kind of the odd one out. And I think that, you know, did all this healing on myself, but then I discovered, wow, my mom had all this sadness too from her life, you know? And so I've done healing working with my mom's sadness. And then not that long ago, I was a demo body in a Biofield tuning class, and my co-teacher is like, oh, Eileen's had so many tune-ups, you know, this is going to be easy. And right out at the very outer edge of my field, where we also pick up ancestral information, there's this immediate sense of my grandmother, my mother's mother, who I've never even met. And then while she was working on me, I was like, oh my God, I don't even know this woman's name. Like, that's how removed I am from this particular ancestor. And yet for my co-teacher, for me, and for the entire classroom, it was really, really evident that was my grandmother's energy. It was an impression, you know, in me. And you think about it, like my egg was inside my grandmother, right? So I was bathed in her sadness. And that's part of what makes me up. And that tonal impression is part of my field. And so the whole healing session actually ended up being about kind of going back another generation and shifting those tones. Like, it's possible, like we can do that, which is kind of weird, but it's sort of a common, like we feel it, you know, when it's happening, you're like, wow, this, and I know that feeling of depression and heavy sadness that I carried with me through so much of my life isn't there anymore. It's not there anymore, you know, and it's been replaced by, a lot of inner prayer, gratitude, singing, you know, like what was has turned into music in me. And I think that that's a journey. I think that everybody wants to sing and dance more and feel the music of their beings more. But we're weighed down not just with our own life traumas, but really the ones of our ancestors as well. We can clear it. It's not easy. You know, it's a commitment. It's not for the faint of heart. And it's not a quantum leap. You know, I think everybody out there in healing is looking for this kind of like, I don't want to say that statement, it's not true. Many people, myself included in the past, look for some kind of quantum leap where you can just dissolve all the noise and like come out as your like shining harmonious self, like instantly. And, you know, it doesn't work that way because it's all in layers. And as you kind of peel off an old layer of noise, then you have to create a new layer of harmony to support that underneath that. And so it's a constant like, okay, there goes some noise and here's the new harmony, and there goes some noise and here's the new harmony. And it takes time, you know. That's been my experience. And I'm impatient, you know, like I want to do it the fast, short way, you know, more than anybody I know. But, you know, and biofield tuning in a way really is a hack, like the way that I figured out how to use sound to do this. You know, it's as simple as if we're a human instrument and you can use a tuning fork to tune instruments, you can actually use a tuning fork to tune people. Like we're self-tuning instruments. And when we hear our own noise, we, you know, our inner little mixing board person like moves knobs and dials in order to hear our own harmony. So we're designed to express harmony. But we have so much noisy inputs that our beautiful harmonious self has really gotten lost.
Okay. Wow. I have so many questions popping up right now. I don't even know where to begin. So let's rewind just a little bit. You were saying that on either side, there's a stream. One is your father's side and one is your mother's side. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I started observing, the first place that I encountered this structure was actually on the left side, or around the heart and the solar plexus. So it was like the mother's ancestral energy started to come in there. And the way that I know that is because over the last 23 years of working with tuning forks, I've discovered that there's a whole vibrational language that all of our bodies, all of nature, animals, plants, everything speaks this vibrational language where everything is constantly sensing into everything else's vibes. There's no way that anybody can argue with that, right? So everything is really vibrational. We put language on it and we get all, you know, left-brained about it, but really it's a sea of vibrational information. And the tuning forks actually like reveal these vibrational emanations of the body, which are very high frequency and very low amplitude. But the tuning fork also produces these overtones that are very high frequency and very low amplitude. And so those waves intersect on that level, and then that information precipitates down into the hearing range so that you can actually hear depression, hear sadness, hear anger, hear alarm, you know, and this whole other nuanced language besides. And so when I hear dissonance in the fork, there's a whole language there that I understand. And so if I'm getting genetic information on the mother's side, like I just know, I know it. And lots of people learn this language. You know, it's not, I don't have some special gift. You know, thousands of people are learning this language right now. And the more you're exposed to it, the more you get it. You know, and you, like any language, you get it more and more in time. So, so there was this sense that it was like a stream, maybe 1.5 inches wide. So I'd be moving the tuning fork through a person's field and reading the record of their lives. And all of a sudden I'd get to the spot about 10 inches off the body, and it would feel and sound completely different. It would feel like there was a stream of energy. I'd feel in my fingertips, and it would sound different. It would sound more complex. It would sound just like it would have a lot more information kind of flowing through, you know, this sort of current of energy. So that was kind of initially where I noticed it worked. And there was a feeling that by changing the music just in this one little spot, that it was going upstream to the ancestors, that it was flowing in that river going upstream, and it was also going downstream to people's descendants. So that you know, because the DNA is an unbroken chain throughout time. Like there is a resonant connection throughout all of it. And right, I mean, really in our cells, the information goes back to the beginning of life itself, because that's where it came from. Well, that's pretty wild. You know, like the birth of the universe or whatever is in us. Yeah. So, but then in time, what I found that the right side started to show up as well, whether it was there all along and I just wasn't noticing it, or whether what seemed to me to be happening, and this is, you know, was started happening in classes where we would get into the ancestral stream, we'd be working into that river, and then all of a sudden the room would fill up with this cool breeze, like the air would become ionized, and there would be this sense that the ancestors were showing up, like the sense of like this gathering of ancestors happening. In certain places, this would happen more than other places, like Halifax, Nova Scotia, like multiple times we would get into the ancestral river, the cool breeze would come in, people would feel it, the more sensitive people would actually see people. And one of the most profound experiences that I had with this was when I was teaching in Australia, and there was a Maori woman who was on the table and we were treating her, and we got into the ancestral river. I don't remember whether it was the mother's side or the father's side, but the whole room filled up with ancestors that we could see. Like everybody felt them. Everybody felt them. And when this woman sat up from the table from being treated, like she looked like a queen. She looked like a queen. I mean, it was so profound. And I had the sense of seeing all these ancestors gathered, and they all turned to me and bowed. And like I saw this, and other people saw this. It was so real. It was so, so real. You know, the Maori honor their ancestors. They feed their ancestors. They acknowledge their ancestors much more than we do. You know, American culture is like, forget about it, you know, onward and forward. We don't give any thought at all to where we came from. That's not how we're programmed. And we don't feed and honor the ancestors, so they don't show up. But so it can, you know, that can happen. That sort of mystical feeling, that sort of shamanic induction of, you know, what's beyond the veil can definitely present, and it's consistent when it does, and it feels very real. And when you have a room full of students and they're all perceiving the same thing, there's definitely something going on there, right? So I just want to say this point before I forget it, and that is that for many years, I kind of really developed biofield tuning in the mountains of Vermont, in a little town called Johnson, with a population about 2,500 people. And I never advertised. I never had a sign. I've never had a sign on my door, like nothing. And it's sort of an invisible tuning fork waving person in the middle of nowhere. And yet somehow person after person after person found their way to my office and said to me, "I'm here to heal my ancestral lineage." And I'm like, well, yeah, I came to the right place. I don't know how you found me, but that seems to be what's going on here. So, so I think that there's many, many people who are feeling the call to heal their ancestors because they're realizing that it's not just about you and your problems right now. It's about the whole train that got us here, and, you know, everybody along the way that on a certain level in the time-space continuum is still living. And whatever we do now actually does affect them, and they sense that. And I feel like they sense that biofield tuning is doing this. And so there's a feeling of them showing up more and more, which means that these ancestral rivers have actually become much stronger than they were even a few years ago. Like when you're working, you come into them, you work, they definitely present, and they present all the way down both sides of the body now, whereas before I was only finding them here. It's a feature that everybody who learns to do this work encounters at some point or another. You know, you're like, whoa, I'm in the ancestral river, and it'll hold you there. It'll hold the fork there, and it'll work. You'll hear the anger, you'll hear the judgment, you'll hear the depression, the anxiety, all these tones flowing through. But as they sort of flow past the fork and flow past our own awareness and our own intention to harmonize them, they clear. It's like the static comes out of the radio station, and that starts, the signal starts coming in nice and clear.
Wow. Again, so many questions. I want to ask you about how the people who are watching this, how they can actually do this for themselves. What does the practice look like? But before we get into that, I want to ask, you mentioned anxiety even, because we've talked about depression, but what's your experience with anxiety and even other illnesses? What have you come across in your practice?
Well, to me, anxiety is a feeling, not necessarily an emotion. Like, what I've observed about anxiety is that some kind of emotion is seeking to press itself up into your awareness, and you are trying to push it back down. And it's just like, and if you just sit and go, what's the actual emotion that's under this feeling? And then allow yourself to experience that emotion, because emotions are waves, they just move through. Then you're not going to be stuck in this tension of trying to keep it down. So, and sometimes what's under anxiety is just excitement. Think about that. Like, we have all these kids who have all this anxiety. Well, what the heck? They're penned and scheduled all freaking long day long. That's the anxiety. Like, they want to run around. They want to be kids. They want to sing and dance and stomp and make noise and climb trees and fish and be freaking human. Right? And so I think that there's a lot I can say about anxiety. Another part of it is just not being grounded. Like, most people aren't grounded. They wear rubber-soled shoes. They're inside too much. They don't get enough sun. They don't lie on the grass. They don't have their hands and feet in the dirt or the sand. We're electric beings in an electric environment, and rubber-soled shoes are insulators that stop us from being able to discharge excess electrostatic energy, which we get being exposed to devices and, all of the soup that we're in. Anybody's wearing a Fitbit, you're charging yourself up the heck and back. Any kind of digital, electronic, anything is giving you excess electrostatic energy, and that creates inflammation. So, so getting grounded and allowing yourself to be more of a natural human is a really good way to just like start to let go of that. I think we're afraid of our emotions. I think we're afraid of our pain. I think we're afraid of our power. I think we're afraid that the world is ending right in front of us. I think we're all painfully frustrated over other people's judgment. There's a lot of reasons for people to be upset and to be having emotional responses. Like, even today when we're talking is the day that this impeachment thing is starting, and Hong Kong is blowing up and this country is falling apart. I mean, like, there's some real shit going down. Excuse my language, but there is. And so we have every right and reason to be scared, angry, emotional, whatever is going on. And if we're trying to hold that all inside and be good and fine, you're going to get some tension expressing itself. I think we have to be really real about our emotions. And I think a lot of people in the healing world, like, have this sort of program that they need to be, the Dalai Lama, that they need to be totally like Zen and, unperturbed all the time. I think that's a really tall order. I think that we're human. We have emotions for a reason. We all have our breakpoints. We all have our times when we get tired and fussy, and, and that's okay. Like, admit you're having an emotional experience. Just, talk about it. And then you get over it. But if you're trying to resist it, you're never going to get over it, because what we resist persists.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it's interesting that you brought up both all the garbage that's going on in the world, all the negative stuff that we're all about. But just before that, you also brought up the fact that there's so many people who are starting to get into ancestral healing. A lot of people are really feeling this strong urge that can't be denied. It almost feels like the ancestors are pushing their way through. At the same time, all of this stuff is going on. Do you have any thoughts on why that's happening at the same time?
Yeah, I think that, we this conversation we have in Biofield tuning sometimes, because this work is all about digging out your emotions that you've been stuffing and hiding, giving you a chance to express them. And then what we find, that once we sort of dig out all of these emotions that we disallowed and we've been stuffing or hiding under sugar or booze or shopping or whatever, when we start to kind of unearth them and cry or, do whatever we need to do to release that emotion, what comes on the other side of that is a kind of spaciousness and creativity. Because these emotions that we've all, been holding and harboring and putting up, a lot of people have been putting up and shutting up. And what are we seeing in the world? But like, people are being like, I'm not putting up with it anymore, right? And this sort of outpouring of anger and frustration and this and that that's going on. Once it's out, whatever kind of chaos that needs to unleash, what is on the other side of that emotional expression is the healing that we seek. You can't bypass. You can't just go be like, I have all this pain, I'm going to go lie down and listen to a Crystal Bowl concert. Like, that's not going to heal it. Like, what you really need to do, that's great and it's good to relax. But I think what people really need to do is shout and stomp and drum and sing at the top of their lungs and like really make noise. I think that we need to express all of the stress and pain and not internalize it, certainly not drug it. Because you have to, this expression, I think it's healing. I think it's purging. I think that, that it's, ugly stuff that needs to come up and out. And what I've observed, doing this work for a long time is that once you're through the ugly bit of detox and release, there's a degree of lightness, and there's usually a surge of creativity. And I think that's what the world is going to need, is a big surge of creativity. And there's a lot of people who are saying that we're coming in the age of the artist. And, whether that's opening up new avenues of creativity or ways to solve the world's problems or whatever, but we got to get all these emotions that are stuck and now moving, we got to get through that part.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you actually, began to answer my next question where you're talking about how you think that people should start singing and drumming and all these kinds of things. And since we're talking specifically about changing the tone of the song of our DNA for ancestral healing purposes, what would you recommend for people who are watching? How can they use what you've talked about today? Do they need to see a practitioner? Is there anything that they can do on their own?
Well, I'm a big fan of giving people, lots of free options. One is to just start paying attention to what's coming out of your own mouth. What words are you saying? What stories are you telling about yourself? What tone are you using? Are you sitting around going, and you're going to create a life like that. It's by our words that we create our life. The word is creative. The word is powerfully creative. And it's really important. So many people are so concerned about what they put in their mouth. I got to eat clean. When really what's coming out of your mouth, I think, is far more powerful to pay attention to. And just listen to the stories you're telling yourself. And like, if everything I'm telling myself is creative, is this what I want to be creating? And I think that it's a hard thing to switch up, because you have to, I just went through this with my hair, of all things. Like, I had a CAT scan a number of years ago and a whole bunch of my hair fell out, and it's never been the same since. And I'm really struggling with it. And I kept on saying, I hate my hair, I hate my hair, I hate my hair. And even knowing what I know about language, it was just this thing. I kept looking in the mirror and I kept on, it was frizzy, it was fuzzy, it's, and my son Cassidy is so wise. He was like, Mom, you gotta love your hair. Just love it. And so I started, being like, okay, I love my hair, I love my hair. But there was this big gap where I was trying to love it, but it was still hateful in my opinion, right? But I kept at it and I kept at it. I kept saying I love my hair. And then finally, like, for the first time in my life, I found a good hairdresser and a product that took the frizz out. And all of a sudden, now I'm looking in the mirror and going, oh God, I finally really do love my hair. But there was months there of me saying it when I was faking it till I made it. Mm-hmm. And because of that gap that's there, a lot of people don't keep going saying, I am abundant, I love my beautiful, healthy body, because it's like you try and nothing's happening and it's still not what you want. And so you give up. Mm-hmm. So don't give up. Don't give up speaking what you want. Don't give up that. I think that's super important. Another thing I would say is that in the practice, there's this thing called cymatics. And you can go on YouTube and search cymatics, Cymatics. And it's the study of how waveforms affect matter. And it's the classic physics experiment is done on what's called a Chladni plate, which is a flat black metal plate, and then put something like salt on it, and then have a speaker underneath that when the music, the sound is played, it causes the salt to like form in a particular pattern. Mm-hmm. And so when you change the frequency, the pattern that is being held spontaneously dissolves, and then a new pattern spontaneously forms. Okay, so anytime a particular pattern is in the process of entropy, of dissolution, there is another pattern that is seeking to arise to take its place. There is a syntropic pattern on its way, right? So entropy, dissolution, but all of those particles rearrange themselves into something different. And so I think there's a tendency for people to want to focus on the entropy that's going on at the moment and freak out about that. Okay, but what we focus on, what we look at, what we think about expands. So what we really want to do is be curious about, well, what new thing is arising, right? It's like thinking about we're getting rid of the old pain body, but we've got to build a new light body to take its place. Mm-hmm. So let's not focus on freaking out about the fact that the pain body is dying. Let's be curious about what the new light body looks like, right? Let's be curious about putting our energy into creating systems that do work, mm-hmm. you know, in a way that we actually have control over in our lives. If you focus on what you can add syntropy to in the environment around you and in your own body, then you're going to get more of that. I know it's really hard to not look out on all this and be like, you know, I think the road to staying healthy in everything that's going on right now is really narrow, you know, because these forces of going down are everywhere. And if you're not really centered and balanced and in your core and in a true desire, you know, to like, I want to ride this out, like this is a heck of a ride we're on right now in planet Earth. I want to see what's going on, and you know, I want to stay healthy and I want to stay on my game. You've got to be really centered, and you've got to be really committed to your own path of truth. Otherwise, you're just gonna, you know, you're gonna get the slap down, and that's happening everywhere. You know, I think in this environment of such strong entropy, you're either turning into a diamond or you're turning into dust. And I think that part of being a diamond is healing the ancestor stuff so that you can tap into all the strength that you've inherited from them instead of being stuck in the static and the noise. So I think being really determined to not raise your vibration, but clarify your vibration. You know, another way is to commit to speaking only truth. Now you gotta be really courageous to do that. Like, to be like, even if you're gonna go send a text, like, oh, I really don't feel like hanging out with my friends, so I'm like, oh, something came up and I'm, you know, really, like, I'm just gonna tell a little white lie. Like, every time you tell a little white lie, you putting yourself out of integrity. And you're making yourself more vulnerable to these heavy energies that we're all dealing with. You know, we wanna be in integrity and be able to become a diamond, you know, then we've gotta really consider everything we do. And is this in my integrity or is this out of my integrity? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's probably a tall order, but I think it's really important. I think that we, you know, need to speak our truth and we need to do it kindly. Speaking of truth means just going off, you know? Everybody's having a hard time. We've got to be kind.
Yeah, yeah. I really love that. Don't worry about raising your vibration. Concentrate on clarifying it. That was beautifully said. Thank you. And thank you so much for all of the other words of advice that all made so much sense, and it really landed for me. I'm sure it will for our viewers. Before we go any further, I want to make sure that everyone has the URL for your website. That is biofieldtuning.com. So if anyone watching would like to connect with you and your work, is that the best place to do that?
Yeah. So you can learn all about, we teach classes and we have a store. We have very high quality tuning forks. And I've recorded a lot of audio tuning fork sessions because, you know, my practice there in the middle of nowhere actually got insanely busy, and I was booking months out. And, you know, you don't want to be a wellness provider and be stressed. Like, it's not in integrity, really. And so I ended up sort of driven by necessity doing these group distance tuning fork healings, which I know sound kind of ridiculous. I have a whole series on energetic repatterning. There's actually 10 hour-long audio sessions where I go deeply into this genetic healing. Now, the hesitation I have in sharing any of that is just because the sound quality on these recordings, it's really not so good. You know, I think people want like really high quality audio. It's not. I'm on the road a lot and kind of, you know, don't have an audio person, doing it through my laptop. And so, you know, the sound, you're not listening to beautiful sounds. What you're actually receiving is an energetic transmission. And so if you can kind of get past the fact that the sound is a little rough in some of them, but really tune into what's happening in the energy field, then you can really get the benefit out of them. So there's all kinds of stuff like that that's available. And a lot of people are becoming practitioners. It's such a great method to practice because it's fascinating, and it really helps people. You know, it helps people get unstuck. I think a lot of people really suffer from just being stuck, right? Not being in alignment with the desires of your conscious mind, and sort of being stuck in these subconscious patterns. And we can actually find where those subconscious patterns are in your electromagnetic body, where things are out of alignment, where things are full of noise or static, or where your electric system is being held in a lot of resistance. And we can help to release that and induce a state of flow into your electromagnetic body, which is essentially your mind, which brings you more into alignment with yourself, more present in this moment, more focused, which makes you a much better manifester. You know, it makes life easier. It makes it easier for you to stay in your groove and in your flow instead of like going off into the rough and like having drama, you know, because there's a lot of that. Drama costs a lot of time and energy. Nobody really wants to be stuck in it. You know, we just kind of want to be in our flow and be groovy. And that's that like when you clarify your signal, then you just have a more pleasant experience of life. You have an easier experience of life. There's less misunderstandings going on.
Okay. Now, the Energenetics course that you have online, if someone were to do that, would they also need to have their own tuning fork, or is this something that they don't need their own tool for?
No, they don't need their own tool. It's their audio. And, you know, there are no courses available online where we provide any kind of certification or credit towards certification. All our certification stuff is in person. So that's something I want to clarify, because everybody always wants to learn online, but we feel like there's a transmission that happens in person that's absolutely necessary. Mm-hmm. And so these are just audio sessions that you listen to me. I'm conducting a Biofield tuning session on you. I'm conducting it on a hologram of everyone who was listening live, and everyone who would ever listen to the recording was present in that tuning. So you were there. Even if you weren't there, you were there, because that's the way it works in the ether. We just intend these things, and that's the experience. And so, yeah, so it's just, you know, it's 10 hours of just listening through headphones, or, you know, with pretty good speakers. And it's a combination of coaching, of education, and this electromagnetic adjustment in your field. So, you know, it's a bunch of different things, but you get a lot of information, energetic information, and sort of stuff to think about too.
Okay, great. Wow. So much information. We could go on for hours, but we're almost at the end of our time together, sadly. Before we wrap it up, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure that we surface before we go?
Well, I believe that as instruments, that we all have the potential to be in tune. Mm-hmm. You know, that is, that some people are a lot more out of tune than others, and have been for generations, and that it's not an easy fix, but I think that, and we're going to go out of tune constantly. Like, that's the thing that's really important to understand. There's no like stasis here. There's no like, okay, I'm in harmony and I'm going to be, for the rest of my life now. This just doesn't work that way. Your instrument is going to go out, it's going to get battered around, it's going to have bad days, but the more you practice bringing yourself back into tune, whether it's playing with tuning forks, whether it's learning an instrument, whether it's taking time every day to sing or to, I love singing gospel songs. Like, if I'm kind of like out of sorts, I'm put on some gospel and sing at the top of my lungs in the car for a little, and that's good medicine. So I would just really encourage you to use your own voice, playfully and determinedly, and believe that you can be, you can bring yourself into tune. You can bring yourself into that, what I call your tonal sweet spot. That it's possible to get there, and that you're going to go in and out of it, and that's okay. But, first you must believe it's possible. And I just want to let you know that it is, and work at it, and understand that it's going to take a while and it's going to take practice to get there. But if you keep at it, you get there, and it's worth it.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Eileen, for joining us today. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
All right. Once again, Eileen McKusick, and I'd like to thank our viewers for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this session in the Ancestral Healing Summit.
Thank you for joining the Ancestral Healing Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit ancestralhealingsummit.com. To learn more about our global programs to support you in waking up in all the areas of your life and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing this empowering path of healing your lineages with your friends and family.